on.
So this video is on chapter 9. What are some tensions that come out of globalization and how do we respond to it? In this case here, chapter 9 is on economic impact, 10 is on cultural impact, and 11 is on security impact. Now, when we talk about impacts of globalization, we can look at it in the three different broad spectrums: the individuals, the companies, and the countries. Basically, when globalization occurs, some countries benefit and others don't. Now let's look at the benefits. Countries that benefit often report that they have increased economic growth, which means that they are growing in their economy because there's more business that comes to their country. Because of more business coming into their country, they can have increased tax revenue, which allows them to build more infrastructure in the future, like schools, roads, street lights, and any other infrastructure that they need. Because of that, they can also continue to expand the economy. When you build more of these roads, telecommunication lines, and even more offices, wouldn't that attract more companies to want to come to set up their shop in the country? And so the economy continues to expand further and further. Now, when more and more companies come to the country to open, they will provide more job opportunities. And if you think about it, if more companies come to the country to open, they also provide more goods and services which are more diverse for citizens. So for example, Singapore is a classic case of a country that has benefited from globalization. Since the start of independence and way before that, it started to encourage foreign investments from overseas. Multinational companies started to open their factories and their offices in Singapore. This resulted in the gross domestic product, which is the amount the country earns as a whole, from 2.16 billion in 1960 to 390 billion in 2014. Remember, in social studies, you need some figures, so please memorize this. Because of this, many new industries were developed in Singapore, like pharmaceutical, which make our medicine and drugs, medical technology, and even the energy sector has been developed in Singapore. So Singapore did benefit from globalization, and we call that economic growth. However, countries also face economic downturn because of the now increasing interconnectedness and interdependence uh, in among the different countries. Basically, it means that when one country's economy faces a downturn or a recession, okay, we can call it a recession, other countries will also suffer. It is as simple as this: when USA faces an economic recession, they start to withdraw their overseas investments, and one of the countries that they withdraw from is Singapore. They also start to reduce their demand for goods and services, some of which is services and goods that they buy from Singapore. With that, it will cause Singapore to lose income, and over time, some of our companies might need to downsize or retrench people because there's not enough business. And so there will be less employment. And so globalization also impacts the country because countries eventually go into downturn when one affects the other. A classic example is the global financial crisis in 2008. In the United States, financial institutions started to collapse because of bad loans and the things that they did that caused them to be in decline. Because of the financial crisis in the United States, it started to affect many different countries, and stock markets fell all across the world. Overall decline of demand for goods and services fell, and there was a global unemployment of 50 million people all around the world. Now, not only countries suffer from economic impact or get impacted by economic impact of globalization, companies too. Now, when companies start to expand and to go into new countries, we say that they have moved into new markets. And when they move into new markets, they might find lower labor costs, cheaper resources like land and raw materials, and maybe even cheaper assembling costs. So, in some sense, they increase their profits and they increase their market share from not just selling their products in Singapore, they now can sell to many different countries in the world. DBS Group in Singapore has now branches in Hong Kong, Taiwan, India, and Indonesia. CapitaLand, which owns shopping centers such as Raffles City, has now managed buildings, resorts, shopping malls, offices, and homes in China and in Singapore. So they have now increased their market share to include properties in China, and now they have higher profits for that. Now, however, some companies may face lower profits and lower market share because they start to have increased competition from other companies, and that is a problem for them. It's harder to gain a share of the profits from the global economy, and companies who fail to innovate may even lose business and even be out of the competition. One example is Nokia, a leading mobile phone company in 1999. They failed to innovate and now have currently lost out to Samsung and Apple. Singapore's small and medium enterprises, that means companies that are small and located in Singapore, sometimes are unable to compete with larger companies because Singapore's market is a small domestic market. They might not have enough expertise and labor for them to innovate and improve themselves to go overseas and eventually work themselves into a multinational company. And sometimes these small and medium enterprises may need to close operations because of that. Now let's look at individuals. Some individuals have high income because they can now work overseas. They have skills that are highly sought after by multinational companies, and they progress in their jobs. For example, in Google Singapore, they are now hiring many designers, software programmers, and people who can communicate different Asian languages. Now, if you are someone with such skills, you are highly sought after. You can work for Google and you might gain higher income. However, others may lose their jobs because of this increase in competition for jobs. They may have to settle for lower income or risk losing their jobs if the company decides to move their factory somewhere cheaper. Also, unskilled workers who fail to innovate may lack certain skills that new companies may need, and so eventually they might lose their income. An example is Uniqlo, a Japanese company who moved their manufacturing plant from China to Vietnam, causing many people in China to lose their jobs. Now, as you refer to all this, you need to remember that countries are grappling with this and they need to help the companies and the individuals to stay ahead. So as you are reading through this, think about the Budget 2017 initiatives by the Singapore government. How is it helping local small and medium enterprises to innovate and to go overseas? How is Singapore helping individuals to upgrade their skills so that they can cope with globalization and be of advantage in this global economy now? With that, we end chapter 9 of this video.